You know me from Rocky 5. But in real life, I'm Tommy Morrison. A heavyweight with 24 knockouts. And I'm going to the top.
Anyone that can go in there and knock somebody out with one punch is special.
He had a style that people loved. I mean, heavyweights with power, with explosiveness, every punch with bad intentions.
He hit me hard I've ever been hit in boxing.
But when Tommy left the ring, then he was out of control.
I was informed just a little while ago that I have tested positive for the HIV virus.
You have a kid that's on top of the world who is a rock star. And then in one moment's time, in one day, people run from you. How do you cope with that?
I'd ask that you no longer see me as a role model, but see me as an individual that had the opportunity to be a role model and blew it.
So, as you might have guessed, we are talking about Tommy the Duke Morrison, known to many of us as Tommy in Rocky 5. He was also WBO heavyweight world champion in 1993. He beat George Foreman on points and very sadly had to retire in 1996 after testing positive for HIV. He died in 2013. He would have been 50 years old this month. So we wanted to talk a bit more about Tommy the Duke Morrison. And to do that, we're joined on the line by Elizabeth Merrill, who's a senior writer with ESPN and who wrote some brilliant pieces on Tommy Morrison later on in his life. Elizabeth, great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, I mean, we just played that little montage there, which sums up the Tommy Morrison story in many ways. I know you spoke with him and maybe with his family and friends later on in his life as he was battling AIDS. But if we sum up the Tommy story, it was a real whirlwind in his early 20s, not least Rocky 5. I mean, ultimately, so many of us know him predominantly through Rocky 5.
Yes, that's true. When he sort of hit that was back in, I think, 1990, and really where his sort of star took off, starring in that movie with Sylvester Stallone. So I met Tommy like far after that, probably, it was 2007, I believe. I was working at the Kansas City Star. He was in town at the time, and he was claiming that he didn't have HIV. And so I spent a day with him. He was he was training in Arizona at the time. But he was a big name in Kansas City. That's kind of where he came up through the ranks and sort of lived out some of his celebrity life. There's a lot of stories about his exploits on Westport, which is a big bar district down there. It was, at least, back in the 90s. And just kind of the high living he was doing with his entourage and various women. And so in 2007, he was staging a comeback. And he was in Arizona training, and he said he didn't have HIV, that it was a government conspiracy. We drove around, we talked, and it was just it was a interesting day, but it was a very confusing day when he was describing, because a lot of people remember that press conference, or you've probably seen, if you're not old enough, you've seen video of that press conference when he retired, when he said he wanted to be an example, for HIV prevention. And then to come and say 11 years later that he didn't have it, it was sort of stunning. And the whole idea that it was a government conspiracy. And he sort of lived by that for the next 7 or 8 years. No, sorry, my math is horrible. For about the next 6 years, being an AIDS denialist until his death in September of 2013.
So we're talking about 1996 when he made the announcement that he was HIV positive, and he had beaten George Foreman in 1993 on points to win the WBO heavyweight world title at 24 years of age. He had done the Rocky movie when he was 21 years of age, so really he had the world at his feet, and there was a multi-million-dollar fight deal, a multiple fight deal in conjunction with Don King that was going to culminate in a fight against Mike Tyson, and he failed the drugs test, HIV test, in the build-up to the first of those 3 fights, I think it was, in '96. Here's a little clip of his press conference where he made the announcement to the world.
I spent the last 3 days contacting the people that I've come in contact with over the past 3 or 4 years. There's a number of sparring partners out there that I've worked with over the years, but more importantly, the young ladies that I've been intimately involved with over the past 3 or 4 years. Those people that I have not been able to contact have contacted me. My prayers go out to them nightly and their families in hopes that everything somehow will be okay. Speaking of myself for a moment, there was a certain point in time in my life that I lived a very permissive, fast, reckless lifestyle. I knew the HIV virus is something that anyone could get, but I also believe that the chances were very, very slim. I thought that the real danger of contacting this rested in the arms of those who subject themselves to certain types of lifestyles. Addicts who share needles, people who practice a homosexual lifestyle. I honestly believe that I had a better chance of winning the lottery than contracting this disease. I've never been so wrong in my life. To all my young fans out there, I'd ask that you no longer see me as a role model, but see me as an individual that had the opportunity to be a role model and blew it. Blew it with irresponsible, irrational, immature decisions. A decision that one day could cost me my life.
So that's Tommy the Duke Morrison in 1996. That was 3 days, Elizabeth. We're speaking with Elizabeth Merrill, a senior writer with ESPN. That was 3 days after he found out he had tested positive for HIV. And he sounds there, in those immediate days afterwards, like somebody who has actually accepted and digested the news quite well and quickly and comprehensively. So when did he get it into his head that he wasn't HIV positive?
Well, I think he started reading sort of these conspiracy theories on the internet. He started reading more and more about these AIDS denialist stories, and he, keep in mind too, he really wanted to fight again. Even then, I've been told that the news that he was HIV positive, despite that lifestyle that he had, and this is a guy who came from nothing. He soaked up that lifestyle because it was such a whirlwind time for him, and but when he heard that news, he thought he could still fight that night, even though he was HIV positive. And so that press conference and him coming to terms with that, over the years, he was meant to fight, and he always thought he could get back to that. And perhaps part of him being able to fight again was he had to believe that he didn't have HIV, and he had to convince other people that he didn't have HIV. Now, he did fight twice during his, quote-unquote comeback. They were in places that did not, that weren't sanctioned. And also, there was talk, the whole thing is like a movie script. There was talk of blood samples being switched. The lawyer who helped set up the interview that I had with him in Arizona in 2007, later that year, maybe the next year, came out and said that he was HIV positive and that, they weren't on terms anymore and speaking terms anymore, and they were sort of in a spat about that, and he was claiming that Tommy did indeed have HIV, as he started, so he stopped taking his medicine. You hear a lot of people, these days, if you're HIV positive, you can still obviously live a long life with today's medical advances, but you can't if you don't take the drugs that you need to sustain yourself. And when things started to go downhill for him, there were other reasons that he said that he was sick. There was, his people. Tommy and his wife said that he had Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then his wife had told me that he was sick because toward the end because they had found a 12-foot piece of surgical gauze in his chest that was put there during a surgery and was not removed. And after that sort of led to his downward slide. He went from different hospital to hospital and wound up dying in Omaha, Nebraska. I know that he believed he had something else, and doctors who had treated him earlier on in the process believed something else. And, he had said he had something else 20-some years ago, so...
And do you really believe that he believed he didn't have HIV? Because there's a 30 for 30. Would totally recommend it. It's well worth the watch about Tommy Morrison, and in that his mother and other friends and family give very frank accounts of his life and his illness. And his mother is certainly of the opinion that he knew he had HIV. He knew he had full-blown AIDS towards the end of his life, but maybe it was in a bid to keep fighting somehow, or just deal with the horror of what he was going through, that he pretended he didn't to the outer world. But they feel he knew.
Yeah, so in the summer of 2013, actually before that, maybe months before that, I got a few emails from boxing fans who has asked me, hey, what's going on with Tommy Morrison? I've heard that he's dead. I'm worried, He used to be really active on message boards, kind of interacting with the fans and stuff. He liked that. I mean, he loved his fame. And so I decided, hey, let's check into it. Tried to get a hold of people who were close to him and finally tracked down his mom in Aurora, Missouri, which is kind of, well, I was going to describe where it is, but like in Ireland, probably people don't know. But it's sort of like a mountainous Ozark sort of region. It's right outside, kind of near that. And, I sat in her living room, and she said that he was dying of AIDS, that he, that at one point maybe he could have saved himself by taking medicine, but that it was too far gone. She expressed her sadness and frustration over the fact, that he was in denial and that he wouldn't, and that, his caretaker would not do anything to help save him. And by that time, this was sometime, I don't know, I want to say mid or late summer, she had resigned herself to the fact that he was going to die soon, and he was going to die of complications of AIDS. And, she was very close to him. She had a hard time being able to see him because he was going from hospital to hospital. And, any money that he made during that time, he didn't have it at the time of his death. That money was all gone. He had a lot of hangers-on. Back in the earlier stages of his career, he spent a lot of money. He was a generous guy, a charismatic guy, which is why he was so popular. And so it was just a really sad story of a guy. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to say he had this or this. All I can do is tell you what his mother said, what his brother told me, and the other things that I'd heard, and all signs pointed to what he had talked about during that press conference back in '96 about what had ailed him at that time. And, his mother was obviously very upset and frustrated at the situation. And, he could have done a lot of things. I mean, maybe he couldn't have fought again, which was kind of his dream in his life, but well, he would have made a really good, boxing commentator. he would have, he had the personality for that. He had the draw, the magnetism, and there's a lot of things he could have done to sort of, earn his keep in the business. And it's just sad and tragic the way it all ended for him.
Yeah, it is, because the 8 years he was a professional fighter really were so exciting, and it was a very glamorous time for the heavyweight division in the 90s. To chart out his career briefly for people, so he was very close to getting to the 88 games, and he was beaten by Ray Mercer, who in the trials, who went on to win gold in Seoul. So that was the level he was very close to, and it was a split decision. And then he embarked on his professional career. He claimed he was related to John Wayne, hence the nickname the Duke. And what really propelled him in 89-90 to national fame was Rocky V, as you said, and he was 21 years of age. And it's a pretty dreadful movie. I mean, it definitely is not one of the stronger Rocky movies. I think we can all agree on that. But if you watch him in it, for a 21-year-old who has had a fairly loose upbringing, which we can talk about in a while, there was a charisma there. He put in a very reasonable performance considering his lack of acting skills. And then, he goes on and he really captures the imagination. He loses to Ray Mercer again in a world title fight. And ultimately in 1993, 3 years after the Rocky movie, he beats George Foreman on points. He's the WBO heavyweight world champion. He's 24. Everything is stretching ahead of him. So that was an incredibly exciting 3 or 4 year period for him. Talk to us about fame and the entourage and how he handled all of that. The 30 for 30 documentary certainly outlines a lot of that. He had an entourage of maybe 20 friends, and they did not put their hands in their pockets for anything. One of his friends puts forward the opinion, and he's not a doctor either, but he felt that Morrison actually had sex addiction. He was that promiscuous. His life was that out of control.
Yeah, he was young and probably naive in a lot of ways. He was sort of, in some ways, he was a big celebrity in Kansas City, which is not that far. He's from Jay, Oklahoma. So it was close enough to his home. And, he trained in Kansas City, and drinks would be on him. He loved being sort of the center of attention, the life of the party. And there was, you heard some of that in that press conference. He didn't believe that you could contract HIV through heterosexual sex, which, obviously at that time in the mid-90s, I think there had been a lot on that, that it's said differently, and so that, but, that was sort of he was sort of living the time of his life then, and he just, in his mind, he believed, how it is when you're young, probably not to this degree, but you sort of feel invincible.
Sure.
He's in a sport where you feel invincible, where you're a tough guy. And I think that was, and yeah, he did. He had a lot of friends who maybe weren't around after the money ran out.
Right.
But he had a pretty good time during those years. And then, another thing we're leaving out is he was married to 2 women at once, and both of their names were Dawn. So that was pretty confusing.
Right.
But he did. He was larger than life. He lived, life that I'm surprised that there hasn't been some huge movie on him, just because it's incredible, sort of some of the things he did, the things he ingested, as far as just the things that I've heard. He had a good time, and obviously paid the price for it.
Yeah, it was a hell of a price to pay. He came from a tough background as well, as a tough upbringing.
He did. His father, a pretty rough character. There's stories about how Tommy started boxing well before, the age where you start boxing professionally. And his parents encouraged him. His brother was a fighter. His mom at one time was in trouble with the law. His dad, was very hard on him. They didn't have a lot of money. There were a lot of, there's stuff, if you trace back to his dad's story, his dad had a rough life too, and, it was, he was actually, though, Tommy was actually a very good football player. Could have gotten a college football scholarship, but yeah, he had a very tough upbringing, all the way around. His life was not easy. And so you go from that to the story of riches and success, and it was a big turnaround for him, and then to lose it again when you're diagnosed with being HIV positive. I mean, he was just very lost. There was kind of, one thing, he had a few true friends that weren't like in it for the money, with him, and he sort of disconnected with them too. And so, he spent some time in jail. It was a very up and down life with many lows.
Yeah, well, in 1996, HIV was a death sentence. You can only imagine what that would do to your psychology when you're in his position. I guess to finish on one of the real highs, because, hey, listen, I mean, not many of us get to star in a Rocky movie, and not many of us are world champions and beat George Foreman, and he did all of that. So, there were those moments, and he had talent as a fighter, there's no doubt.
Sure. Yeah, and you can see that. So he has two sons who are fighting now, and you can see that in them. Both of them look a lot like him. And, that's another thing. It's like another reason why he was so popular. He sort of had those rugged good looks. But to see him, like, in the early, I don't know, there was a mugshot of him, of Tommy I'm talking about, probably from about 2011 when he got arrested on a charge, and you couldn't recognize him. He was bald, he was gaunt. I mean, he looked at least 10 or 15 years older than he was, and I think that was the effects of his illness taking hold. And so, very talented, had a lot going for him, a lot of demons too.
Okay, well, he would have been 50 years old this month. That's Tommy the Duke Morrison we're talking about. Elizabeth Merrill from ESPN, thanks so much for talking to us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. See ya.